Hi again. Okay. So I want to talk briefly about this, and Jesus made all foods clean. Getting time and time again from Torah observers and Lee from Philia Ministries and most of her Torah girls who are following her, that was in addition to the text, and you can't find it before the 70s. By the way, I found a Bible from, I think it was like 1905 that has it in there, but at any rate. Um, That was not an addition to the text. Okay, there's no proof of that. And I'm going to, right now, if I can get it up, give you um, some James White. I love James White, honestly, because he's thorough and he's truthful and he's also polite about it. Um, and yeah, let me get that up and I'm gonna play this. Get it so you guys can see it.
They look a lot alike. They're different. That's good enough. Okay, we'll go with that in a second. So I get this message from my son yesterday, and I assume he's talking with somebody. He's been running into some Black Hebrew Israelites and stuff, and so he says, "So what's the textual background, and how thoroughly documented and firm is the documentation for Mark chapter 7 and that section where Jesus is talking about foods, and he proclaims all foods clean, and it's not what goes into a person but what comes out, and the heart, and the middle section of Mark chapter 7. No, those are not the normal things that my son and I are talking about in WhatsApp, but that's what he asked yesterday. And so what I did is I sent him these two pictures, these two pages, which you just saw briefly up on the screen. And he sort of guessed that's probably from P45, huh? And I said, yeah, it's from P45. It just so happens that our earliest and fullest manuscript of the Gospel of Mark is the papyrus manuscript that I'm working on a PhD in textual criticism at Northwest University in Potchefstroom, South Africa. And so, yeah, it was sort of easy for me to grab some high quality scans of P45. But here's what's interesting, and this is the point I want to get to. If we look at the manuscripts, that is, if I can get Rich's attention long enough to get us to look at the manuscripts, because now he's doing stuff with the phones. If we look at these two manuscripts, hey, there we go. You will notice that they look very similar, but for example, you can see the damage down here is similar to this side. But if you look carefully, they're not the same page. They've experienced similar damage, but they're not the same page. This is the 6th folio. This is the 7th, if I recall correctly. What we do have is, you can see up here, this is the top margin. There's nothing written above here. You can see very clearly the top margin on this side. But the text goes all the way out here, all the way. That might be the margin. No, it goes beyond that. You've got some writing over here. So the margins on both the right and left-hand sides, and then you've got writing all the way down to here, writing all the way down to here. The bottom of the page is missing. And so the problem is that specific text in Mark 7 that has the statement declaring all foods clean would be somewhere down here. Okay? Because this section here is after that. This starts at Mark 7:3, and this starts at Mark 7:25. And that's in between that, but it's not here. It would be down below here. And you can see, obviously, we only have a portion. There's going to, this is going to be extremely hard to read in here. I mean, you can make some out over here. You can sort of figure out what's there just by counting letters and stuff like that. But the issue, though, is this. Some of you may recall, I don't know, about a year or so ago, we responded to the assertion of Ijaz Ahmed that P66 is not supportive of the reading God at John 20:28. And what we did, as we pointed out, was, well, actually, it's fragmentary at that point. And you don't, just because a manuscript is fragmentary at a point, assume that it has a reading other than the standard reading of the manuscript tradition. And so I think I'll just put this sort of up on the same section here, and we can sort of just wing it here. Oh, back of my thing came off. My little tablet thingy sort of fell apart. So here's the idea. We have the first manuscript. We have the first page here, and then the second page here, and the section that's missing is down here. All right. Now, can we, with some level of honesty, say, well, there's no question about what the original reading was? I think we can, because here we have a papyrus, and it's let's say here's 100, here's 200, here's 300, here's 400. Okay, P45 is right around this period of time. It's right in this time period between 200 and 220. Could be as early as 180, but let's just go 200 to 220. Now we have around 325. So about here, we have codices like Sinaiticus and Vaticanus. And in P45, in Mark chapter 7, you have the same text in, let's say, verses 3 through 17 and 25 and following, as you have here. So you have, in that section, you have a straight line of transmission. And so when you come to a lacuna, what's called a hole, in here that is not here. This contains all of that. Here you have this line here. It matches. The transmission line is the same between the two. When you have a lacuna, then you can properly and safely assume that what is missing in the early papyri, but is found here, was initially in the papyri. Because if there was something else up here, there would be a different line of transmission that would go this direction, and we'd have manuscripts over here that have completely different readings, but we don't. Not only that, but if we go back to this here, we know from other pages of P45 the average number of lines per page. And we know how wide they were. So we know the average number of letters that would be written across. Okay? So you can't assume that in this one little section down here there was some whole new story about something completely different because we know there's only a certain amount of information between here and up here, and it just happens to match exactly what we have in later manuscripts. So the idea that, well, this stuff was missing or was added at some other time is simply impossible. This is the very next page. There are only a certain number of letters and lines that can be fit down here, and we have that information in Sinaiticus, in Vaticanus, in Washingtonianus, etc., etc. And so sometimes when people say, well, basically my answer to my son was, while P45 doesn't contain that specific verse, there is no question that it originally did. And people will say, well, but it's not there. Doesn't matter. It's fragmentary. There is not a single manuscript anywhere that gives testimony to any kind of other transmissional history of Mark chapter 7. And so it is pure conjecture on someone's part that there was something else there than what is found in the manuscript tradition. And so the fragmentary nature of the papyri, can be frustrating at times, because when there is a variant, sometimes it'd be like, oh, it'd be so wonderful if, wouldn't it be great to have a papyrus that would cast some light on this particular reading or that particular reading. Mark 1:1, that'd be great. And maybe we'll someday find something like that. We keep finding new stuff. But until then, you cannot simply assume that because it's fragmentary, as long as there is a consistency in the transmission of that text in the manuscript tradition as a whole, it is absolutely appropriate to say, yeah, it was in P45. And there's no question about its originality, etc., etc. So just wanted to bring that to your attention, show that to you, and I'm glad we were able to make that work. Okay, with that in mind,
Okay.
I guess I'm going to have to grab.
So that was it for.
Be able to hear what people are saying.
He said briefly, this was on the dividing line, and he said it briefly during an entire episode of the dividing line, but I happened to have caught it. But yes, I mean, there's been claims by the Torah observers, and I remember one claim from Lee on the Sisterhood that, she couldn't find it before whatever it was, 1970s. Well, I went right to a Bible, and I had commented this when I was still on the Sisterhood, that I just found one from, I forgot when it was, but it was like early 1900s. So it wasn't some modern day version sticking it in there in parentheses. Okay, there is a definite line of transmission of that particular statement, and Jesus made all foods clean. So yeah, you may not believe that it was in the original, and that's up to you. But we can't make. The problem is that we can't make things up to support our dogma. It's the same thing with this whole Easter thing and the blood on the eggs. Okay, I mean, if that really happened, I probably wouldn't want to duplicate it, but you got to have proof. You can't just. This problem with the internet, too many of you people you people in general, are believing whatever any source says. It boggles my scholarly mind to think that some website making a claim without any. I mean, it'd be one thing if the website made a claim and then put sources in that would, like this video I just showed of James White. He's showing the papyri, he's explaining it out. He's not just like, this is a claim I'm making in 2018 and just believe it. He went down, he said, they are in the early papyri. And there's a way to trace that. But, there's so many claims out there that, someone along the line, and it might not have been Lee that first said it, someone said, oh, it's not in a Bible from before 1970s or whatever. And then 25 people say it on the internet. So when people go and search it out, they see a website that makes this claim, and therefore it's all of a sudden true. I don't get it. And that's the way it is with most things today. The other thing I want to touch on briefly, I've seen the claim that the cross was pagan and had something to do with Horus. Look, Horus was not crucified, okay? Crucifixion was a Roman form of capital punishment, not an Egyptian form. There is no history. As a matter of fact, most sources about Horus do not even record that he even died. All you have is that he merged with the sun god and dies at night and comes back during the day. But there's no real encounter of him dying. And white people just someone says it on the internet, and I mean, don't believe me either. But if you're gonna please people, if you're going to make claims, please just back them by historical, archaeological, real proof. I mean, it's just like there a couple weeks ago, in that other Easter video that was promoted by Philia, by that woman pastor or something, where she makes the claim that this statue was ancient Egyptian statue. It was like of a hare or something like that, rabbit, goddess holding a rabbit. It ended up being a Mayan thing from way after Christ. I mean, way after Christians were actually celebrating Resurrection Day. I mean, just because there's a claim on the internet, you should take every claim that anyone says and go back in history, not the history of the internet, but actually historical sources, and see if they are correct. It's a shame that 50 years from now, if the Lord tarries and we're still here, that our children and our grandchildren are going to believe the worst hogwash because it's on the internet. And now all of a sudden, history revisionism, and it's considered true. Go back to the basics. Go back to recorded history. Otherwise, it didn't happen. I don't even know. But as far as the claim Jesus made all foods clean is a modern day throwing in the Bible, no. It's in the early manuscripts, people. All one has to do is research it. Don't believe what you're being told. Research it. It's there. And based on that, things like Acts 10 and Ephesians 2 kind of start making more sense. Oh, I don't know. It's funny the 119 ministry says test everything, but they don't. But really, test everything. Claims can be they're claims without proof. I don't know. God bless you. I guess I don't know when I'll make a video again, but those were some thoughts for today. Anyway, I'm gonna get going. Love you. Bye.